You recognize when a person reaches their point of no return, that silent second when they catch on. They're done. That is where Maddie Brown is. You can sense it. In the way she talks now, in the way she doesn't talk about certain things. No more defending, no more wishing her father would now get it. It is as if she woke up one morning and asked herself, why am I still covering for a man who never covered for me? This is not drama. This is the voice of a daughter breaking out of a history that never benefited her. And honestly, seeing it unravel is like seeing the last of Kody Brown's do. Your self-empire begin to fall apart. See, Kody established his brand on one thing: control of the narrative. Control of the wives, control of the family brand. But what he didn't anticipate, the next generation wasn't buying it. And Maddie, she is walking away from the show too. She is leaving the system behind. Because for years, Kody's whole image, the patriarch, the leader, the provider, was constructed on loyalty, on obedience, on silence. And when Maddie ceased giving him that silence, his entire illusion began to unravel. Guys, this isn't another family dispute. This is the end of an era, the patriarch era, and it didn't end in some huge blowout. It ended because one daughter quietly said, no more. Now let's break down exactly how Maddie did it. What she said, what she didn't say, and how her truth revealed every single crack in Kody's legacy. But let's get one thing straight first. You have to know what that legacy was in order to break something that powerful. Because to dismantle something that was built so intensely, you have to know what it was constructed with. Let's be real, Kody Brown didn't just create a family. He created a brand. Every interview, every episode, every sit-down on that couch was part of an act. The spiritual head, the leader of the family, the man who said, I am just trying to love all my wives equally. Except love wasn't really what kept it all together, was it? It was control. And in the early years, that control functioned. Christine was the cheerleader. Janelle kept the peace. Mary kept trying to earn her stripes. And the children, they smiled for the cameras, followed the rules, and bore the image that all was well. But behind that shiny TLC facade, there was a price. Silence. Everyone had to pretend that everything was in balance when it was not. And no one felt that tension like the children. Because to them, Dad was not just a man, he was the system. If you spoke up, you were being disrespectful. If you pulled back, you were ungrateful. And if you tried to be different, you were betraying the family. That is the trap Kody created without realizing it. His patriarch position wasn't about defending his family, it was about defending his view of himself. And you can only live under that level of control for so long before someone loses it. For Christine, the breaking point was when she knew love shouldn't hurt like begging. For Janelle, it happened when she saw her sons pushed out. And for Maddie, it wasn't a moment. It was years of seeing her mom get dismissed, her brothers get scapegoated, and her dad rewrite history in real time. So when people ask, what did Maddie do? What did she say? It is not about one interview or one post. It is about the years before she finally stopped playing along for Kody's story. Because here is the thing, when you cease to try to maintain someone's illusion, you immediately become their enemy. And Maddie, she stopped protecting Kody. That's when his so-called legacy began to fracture, not because the world turned against him, but because his own children started telling the truth. And that's what we're going to get into next. Because Maddie's not just exposing Kody through words, she's exposing him through absence, through how she lives, through what she no longer tolerates. You've seen people rage quit a family before, slam doors, post cryptic stories, spill everything online. That's not what Maddie did. She just stopped showing up. No statement, no shade, no apologies. And that is exactly why it stung harder than any tantrum ever could. Because silence unsettles people. It leaves room for truth to ring out. And Kody, who has spent years dictating the conversation, couldn't control that. He tried to brush it off, of course, speaking of how kids grow up, how everyone's finding their own way. But deep down, he knows. Maddie's silence isn't distance, it is defiance. See, when you grow up in a house where loyalty equals love, walking away feels like betrayal. But for Maddie, it was survival. She saw her dad rewrite memories, turn weakness into vulnerability, and call submission respect. Then she realized she didn't have to live under his rules to still love her family. That is what changed everything, her absence from those huge family gatherings. That wasn't a scheduling problem, it was a boundary. And in the world of Brown, boundaries are revolutionary. Christine spoke her words of departure. Janelle spoke out in courage. But Maddie, She spoke silently, no drama, no words. Just an unspoken truth, I'm not part of this performance anymore. And that quiet refusal hits harder than any public breakup because it forces everyone else to look at what's left. Kody can't shout over it, he can't edit it, he can't spin it into miscommunication. It's just there, this giant, unfillable space where his daughter used to be, and that space exposes him. Because for years, he told the world he was building a legacy of faith, of unity. But a legacy built on control can't survive freedom. Every time one of his kids chooses peace over performance, another piece of that legacy disintegrates. Maddie's silence is her truth, and her truth is simple. She doesn't owe him the version of herself that keeps his story alive. When Maddie pulled back, Kody did what he always does. He tried to take back control of the story. He started dropping lines in interviews, slipping in phrases like, "Some of my kids are distant," or "They don't understand the sacrifices I've made." It sounds harmless, but listen closely. That's not reflection. That is framing. Because in Kody's universe, distance isn't something that happens because of his choices. It is a symptom of their disloyalty. If the kids rebel, he frames it as rebellion. If they speak out, it is disrespect. That is how he has maintained power all these years, by spinning faster than anyone can call him on it. But Maddie didn't give him anything to spin. No angry quotes, no interviews. She simply lived her life, peacefully in Idaho out of the spotlight, and that scared him because silence cannot be spun. You can't control what a person doesn't say, and every quiet picture of Maddie's life, her husband, her children, her normalcy, became a reflection of all Kody had lost. He attempted to play the proud dad role in public, speaking of supporting her journey. But the vibe behind it wasn't pride, it was permission dressed up as control. And that is the part audiences can sense. He dominated the emotional climate in that household. When he was content, everyone breathed easy. When he was furious, everyone ran around trying to appease him. Now he is yelling into a vacant space. Maddie doesn't have to answer because the truth speaks louder than any argument anyway. Every peaceful post, every snicker with her mom, every second she doesn't talk about him speaks louder than any argument might. And that is what is shattering Kody's facade, not public betrayal, but public apathy. Because when the people who once walked in fear start living autonomously, your power erodes. That is where Kody is today, watching the patriarch era recede while acting like he is still in charge. But you can't command a family that has already freed itself. When Maddie started to step away, she wasn't alone for long. The silence rippled, not through gossip or plotting, but through acknowledgement. Christine noticed first. She's been there, she knows that look, the one that says, "I'm done pretending," and Janelle. Undefined, you could almost see the relief in her face, because every boundary Maddie built gave Janelle permission to hold her own. A mother watching her daughter break a cycle, that is powerful. See, in this family, silence isn't just space, it's solidarity. Nobody sat down and said, "Let's all pull away." It happened naturally, organically. Every one of them arrived at the same conclusion: peace costs distance, and it is worth paying for. That is what frightens Kody most of all. Not anger, not confrontation, it is coming together, but not around him in the middle. Because for years, Kody's authority was derived from keeping everyone separated, working one-on-one, making deals in secret, emotional manipulation, presented as communication. He was the sun, and the rest, everyone else revolved around him. But now, those planets have aligned with one another. Maddie calls Christine for guidance. Christine jokes about it publicly, uncensored. Janelle visits Maddie, spends time with the grandbobbies, posts genuine smiles, not the manufactured kind we used to witness. And every time that occurs, the illusion of Kody's power erodes a little further. He can't play the family unity card anymore because the family is united, just not around him. They found each other in the space his control once filled. That is the legacy Maddie's creating, even if she never labels it as such, a version of the Brown family that is real, healthy, functional. One that exists outside the patriarch, and that is the part Kody can't abide. That the love and connection he purportedly protected are now flourishing in his absence. It is like witnessing your empire collapse, then recognizing it is because people finally discovered how to live without your permission. The Brown family isn't shattering anymore. It is healing, just not the manner Kody envisioned, and Maddie's the quiet pulse of that transformation. If anything annoys Kody Brown, it is to be ignored. Conflict, bring it on. It energizes him. But to be irrelevant, that's a nightmare he never thought he'd have to face. So when the family started moving on without him, Christine's new love, Janelle's independence, Maddie's peace, Kody did what he always does. He tried to rewrite the story. He started using phrases like, "they've all turned against me," or "I'm the victim of miscommunication." But those words don't land the way they used to because the audience has seen too much. Every attempt to defend himself just made the truth louder. That Kody isn't losing control because his family changed. He's losing it because they finally stopped centering him. And Maddie's distance highlights that more than anything, because she's not bitter. She is not dramatic. She is not asking him to get it. She is simply done. When she puts a post out, it is about her husband, her children, her house, a life built on peace, not turmoil. And that peace puts Kody's storm in perspective in security. He wants to be the father who raised strong, independent children. But once those children become independent of him, he takes it personally. That is the contradiction. He spent decades speaking of legacy, but the only legacy his kids desire is space. And the more they live on their own terms, the less control he has over them. He senses it too, in the way they don't call, in the way they cease attending birthdays or family photos, in the way they speak of healing without using his name. That absence is not an accident, it's freedom. And when you've built your entire identity around being the center of attention, freedom feels like betrayal. Kody's trying to keep his relevance alive through interviews and selective vulnerability, but every "I misunderstood" speech just proves the opposite, that he's still chasing control, not connection. Meanwhile, Maddie doesn't need a platform. She doesn't need to defend herself or drag anyone. Her peace is the proof, and that's what cuts deepest, that she found a life better than the one he promised, and she didn't need his permission to live it. The thing about control is that it only works when people participate. And Kody's family stopped participating. Christine stopped playing the devoted wife. Janelle stopped playing peacemaker. And Maddie, she ceased playing the daughter that remained silent in order to shield the brand. Hence, currently, Kody's left performing to avoid audience, attempting to persuade the world that he still has something to lead. But you can't lead a family that has already set itself free. Every legacy reaches the point where it either transforms or terminates. For the Browns, that transition arrived the moment Maddie chose to live on her own terms. She didn't declare it. She didn't need to. Her life became the statement. Think about it. For over a decade, the Brown family legacy was built on the idea of unity through obedience. The message was simple: follow the patriarch, stay loyal to the vision, keep the faith, and you'll be blessed. But what happens when that vision no longer fits the people living inside it? That is what Maddie revealed. Not in anger, but in authenticity. She began to show a version of family that wasn't curated, filtered, or scripted. Raw. A mom laughing with her kids. A woman building a life with her husband, where love isn't quantified by hierarchy, but by respect. That is the quiet rebellion, demonstrating that peace and love can be found outside of Kody's framework. And in doing so, she redefined what family looks like for the Browns. Christine saw it and leaned in, posting joy without apology. Janelle followed, choosing independence over illusion. Even some of the other children began to reflect that same energy. We can celebrate where we came from without repeating it. Maddie doesn't have to tear her dad down because his actions already speak for themselves. Her life speaks to the other one, the one about healing. And that is what resonates so deeply. She is proof that you can leave dysfunction without carrying the bitterness of it with you forever. Kody believed the family's legacy would be loyalty, but the actual legacy turned out to be something he never meant for it to be: freedom. Freedom to speak. Freedom to choose peace. Freedom to love without fear. And it all began with one choice: to cease guarding a man's image to the detriment of your own sanity. Now, when folks discuss the Brown family legacy, they're not discussing Kody's leadership. They're discussing the courage it took for his family to finally exit. That is the irony. Kody's tale was always that of power, but Maddie's tale, it's about peace. And that's the one people will remember, because when the show ends and the cameras go dark, the real story isn't who stayed loyal. It's who learned to live honestly. When one person in a family breaks a pattern, the whole dynamic shifts. And that's exactly what Maddie did. Not by preaching, not by fighting, but by living differently. Her choice to step back from the chaos sent quiet shockwaves through every branch of the Brown family. You can see it in how the older kids talk now. Their tone isn't angry anymore, it's aware. They've learned that speaking truth doesn't mean disrespect, it means refusing to carry someone else's denial. That's the gift Maddie gave them, even if she never meant to. Permission. Permission to question. Permission to feel hurt. Permission to say, I love my family, but I don't love the dysfunction. Before her, silence was loyalty. Now silence looks like acceptance, and none of them are okay with that anymore. And let's be honest, for years the younger Browns watched their dad model one thing and say another. He preached unity but practiced division. He talked about leadership but ran on control. He framed abandonment as discipline and emotional neglect as tough love. Maddie's generation grew up under that tension, and for a long time they carried it without question. But when she broke the silence, even subtly, it gave everyone else a way out. You can tell by how they carry themselves now. The posts are different. The words are different. It's no longer about defending Kody's reputation. It's about protecting their peace. That's the ripple. Every boundary Maddie sets becomes a small act of courage for someone else in that family. Every time she refuses to engage in public drama, she's teaching her siblings that you don't have to respond to chaos. You can simply choose calm. And here's the thing, the Browns' next generation, the kids Maddie is raising, will never know that old system. They'll never grow up watching their mom wait for permission to be heard. They'll see a woman who builds love through consistency, not control. That's generational healing in real time. So yes, Maddie broke Kody's legacy, but she also built something stronger in its place, one built on emotional honesty instead of fear. And the more her siblings see that, the more they follow suit. It's not rebellion, it's recovery. The thing about control is once people stop believing in it, it collapses fast. Kody built his world on control, on being the voice, the authority, the man with the answers. But when Maddie walked away and started living her truth, that foundation cracked. And instead of repairing it with humility, he doubled down with performance. Every time he spoke about reconciliation, it wasn't about healing, it was about optics. He wanted to look like the misunderstood father, not be the father who took responsibility. You could hear it in his tone, the mix of self-pity and deflection. The same pattern every time: blame, denial, victimhood. Maddie didn't need to respond because his behavior said everything for her. Every public attempt to reclaim authority just made him look smaller. He wasn't the head of a family anymore. He was the man trying to control a story that had already outgrown him. When he cried on camera, people didn't feel compassion. They saw manipulation. They saw a man desperate to protect a version of himself that no longer existed. And that's what's so ironic. Because the more he talked about love, the less authentic it felt. Love doesn't sound like strategy. Love sounds like accountability. Meanwhile, Maddie's silence started to speak volumes. No public rants, no posts shading him, just peace. And that peace hit harder than any confrontation ever could. Because control can't survive in silence. It feeds on reaction. It needs someone to play the other role, the villain, the rebel, the problem. But Maddie didn't play. She turned and walked away. That is when the power dynamic changed. Suddenly, the patriarch was merely a man speaking to himself in front of cameras. The family's focus wasn't on him anymore. It was on healing, growth, rebuilding. And that is the truth he can't accept. The Brown name still holds value. It just doesn't hold his version anymore. His bid to own the narrative became evidence of what Maddie had been living all this time, that true strength isn't boisterous, and true authority doesn't require loyalty. Kody's legacy was founded on control. Maddie's is founded on freedom, and one of those will endure past the other. It is funny how fast a narrative can turn. For years, Kody Brown was the focal point of the show, the voice that dictated every episode, every discussion, every emotional turn. But recently, people aren't listening to him anymore. They're paying attention to Maddie. And not because she is dramatic or loud. It is because she is genuine. Her quiet authenticity has done something none of Kody's speeches ever did. It has remade the family's image from the inside out. Viewers aren't discussing the man who held it all together. They're discussing the daughter who learned how to thrive without the drama. That transition didn't happen overnight. It began small. A family photo, a motherhood post, a laugh that felt normal. But over time, people began to notice. There was peace where tension once was. And that is what hit hardest. Because Maddie isn't trying to prove anything. She is not running a campaign or defending a narrative. She is just living. And that normalcy, that calm, healthy version of family, became the strongest form of exposure. Kody spent years deciding what the Browns looked like. He framed every shot, created every narrative, and filtered every emotion. But you can't filter real joy, and you can't fake peace. Now the audience can tell the difference. When Kody speaks about loyalty, it sounds rehearsed. When Maddie posts a photo of her kids, it feels real. And that is the part he'll never be able to compete with. Authenticity doesn't require an audience to exist. The irony is that Maddie didn't aim to change anyone's perception. She wasn't trying to expose anyone, but the moment she stopped playing along, she exposed the truth beneath it. That Kody's control only existed when everyone else agreed to play along. And now, nobody's playing. Christine has her own narrative. Janelle's living freely. Even the kids are forging their own paths without him giving his approval. That is how the legacy turns, not with a battle, but with freedom. Maddie took the narrative Kody constructed on hierarchy and transformed it into one about healing and growth. And now when people think of the Browns, they don't see a patriarch, they see a family learning to thrive without one. The truth is, Kody's definition of legacy was about control. Maddie's definition is about peace. And peace always wins in the end, quietly, completely, and without permission. When control is lost, desperation sets in. And Kody Brown's behavior began to change in ways that made desperation clear. He started speaking of restoring unity, of wanting his family back. But the words rang hollow, because unity for him still equaled obedience. It wasn't about rebuilding trust, it was about restoring control. You could hear it in his tone, sharp one minute, emotional the next. He wasn't grieving lost relationships, he was grieving lost control. Maddie's silence made it worse. Every time she didn't react, he tried harder to get a rise out of her, through interviews, through subtle jabs, through emotional pleas that always came back to him. It is as if he couldn't understand that peace could exist without his permission. But that is the thing, for the first time it did. The more he tried to reel everyone back in, the clearer it became they weren't coming. Christine had moved on proudly and whole. Janelle had found strength and independence. And Maddie had built her own definition of family, one not centered around keeping the peace for someone else. So Kody began relying on his go-to strategy. Guilt speaking of loyalty, of who stood with me when things got tough. But that doesn't work anymore, because the minute you treat love like a transaction, people begin realizing that they don't owe you anything. That is what Maddie caught on to first. Love isn't something you barter for approval. It is something you create with consistency and respect. Two things Kody hasn't demonstrated in a while. The sad part is, he still doesn't get it. He still speaks as if he has been wronged, as if his family left him behind. But what actually occurred is simpler. They stopped choosing pain. And you can't guilt people back into dysfunction once they've experienced peace. That is where Kody's at now, sitting on the couch watching the family live freely, wondering why his words no longer hold sway, because control loses its hold once people cease needing your validation. Maddie didn't reason her way out. She grew her way out, and Kody's efforts to reel her back in only underscore how out of touch he has become. This isn't rebellion at this point, it is recovery. And the man who once commanded with gravitas is left trying to discern how he ended up as the outsider in his own narrative. The truth, he didn't get replaced. He just got revealed. There is something almost poetic about the way Maddie navigated it all. No fights, no interviews, no hyperbole, just serenity. And in a household that lived on tension, that serenity was revolutionary. When you are raised amidst emotional turmoil, peace comes naturally last. You anticipate the next blast, you tense up for it. But Maddie did something else. She quit playing the noise. And that single decision revealed just how hooked everyone had been on Kody's emotional roller coaster. Because that is the way control works. It makes you think that peace is indifference and love has to be accompanied by tension. Kody had constructed an entire emotional construct around that premise. If you weren't responding, you weren't loyal. But Maddie's peacefulness said something else. It said, you can love someone and not let them control you. That is what struck the hardest. She didn't exit in anger. She exited in boundaries. She didn't slam doors, she closed them softly and locked them from inside. And that peacefulness made everyone else confront how differently life could be. Christine reciprocated it, not through fury, but through laughter and happiness. Janelle found peace in solitude, creating a steady beat of her own. Even the younger children picked up, the energy had changed. The Brown family operated on tension before. Now, the women who used to live on that tension have begun running on peace. And it all goes back to Maddie demonstrating that peace doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Kody can't grasp that kind of strength because it is not the kind he gets. It associates strength with control, with dominance, with being heard. Maddie's strength lies in stillness, in choosing not to fight battles that can't be won, and that quiet power takes down his entire system without a word. You see it in every family gathering that doesn't involve him. Every laugh that sounds real. Every photo where peace fills all the space chaos used to occupy. That is how the Brown legacy is shifting, not through confrontation, but through contrast. Kody's downfall has become the shadow side of Maddie's growth. Every time he responds emotionally, she remains grounded. Every time he plays victim, she remains silent. And that difference is everything. Because viewers aren't interested in drama anymore. They're interested in healing. People aren't awed by control, they're inspired by calm. In that sense, Maddie has become the quiet heartbeat of the Brown family's redemption arc. What is crazy is that she never attempted to be the example, she just opted for peace for herself, and that choice became infectious. Her calmness became something like a mirror that made everyone else wonder what they'd settled for so long. Kody's still yelling from the sidelines, trying to convince everyone that he is not the bad guy. But it is too late. The story's already shifted. Because once peace gets in the room, chaos isn't interesting anymore, and that is the story now. Not the man who lost control, but the woman who taught everybody how to find it again. Maddie didn't have to destroy Kody's image. She just had to outgrow it, and she did. By now it is obvious. The Brown family that you see today isn't the one Kody created. It is the one that rebuilt itself after him. And at the heart of that quiet rebuilding is Maddie. She didn't set out to be the face of renewal, but that is what she has become. Every time she drops a glimpse of her life, a simple family dinner, a walk with her kids, a laugh that doesn't feel forced, she is rewriting what the Browns mean. It is not about hierarchy anymore. It is about recovery long. That family's identity was entwined with control, hiding things and appearance. But Maddie took all of that away by living in truth. No spin, no defense. Just truth through action. And that's what people respond to. Fans aren't tuning in for the drama anymore. They're watching the evolution. They're watching what happens when women and kids once trapped in someone else's system start building something real for themselves. Christine, Janelle, and Maddie, they each took a different path, but all of them lead to the same destination, freedom. And Maddie, in her quiet steadiness, became the proof that freedom can exist without anger, that you don't have to destroy someone to heal from them. Kody, meanwhile, still clings to the old version of the story, the one where he's the misunderstood patriarch trying to hold everyone together, but no one's buying it anymore. Because the true image of family isn't in the staged unity, it's in the honest distance. And when fans look at Maddie, they see balance. They see a woman who carries both her love for her family and her right to peace. That duality, compassion without submission, is what makes her so powerful. She's not pretending everything's fine, but she's not dragging it into the spotlight either. She's showing that peace isn't denial, it's choice. And that choice is what's transforming how people see not just the Browns, but what healing after control really looks like. Now, the family name doesn't evoke one man's dominance. It reflects resilience. The women carry it differently now. Softer, stronger, freer. And that's the legacy Maddie has quietly built. A legacy of recovery, because legacy isn't about who leads. It's about what survives. And what's surviving now isn't Kody's structure. It's the strength of the people who learned to live beyond it. The truth is, Maddie didn't just break her father's legacy. She repaired what it cost, and that kind of healing doesn't fade, it multiplies. Every story has a turning point, and for the Browns, that moment wasn't loud. It wasn't a confrontation or a dramatic goodbye. It was Maddie choosing peace and never looking back. That's how revolutions really begin. Not with explosions, but with stillness. Not with chaos, but with clarity. Maddie didn't break her father's legacy out of hate. She broke it by refusing to live a lie, and that's the truth Kody never saw coming. that the family's freedom wouldn't come from rebellion but from release. Because when people stop reacting, the power dynamic ends. When they stop explaining, the control loses its grip. And when they start living for peace, the old story simply dissolves. Maddie's life now is proof of that. No drama, no defensiveness, just presence. She's raising her kids in an environment that feels safe, not tense. She's showing them that love doesn't require fear and that leadership looks a lot like humility. That's how you heal a legacy. Not by rewriting history, but by building something better in its place. Kody's still trying to make sense of what happened. He talks about betrayal and distance, but he doesn't understand that those weren't the cause. They were the result. The result of years where his voice mattered more than anyone else's feelings. The result of putting control over connection. Now, the people he tried to keep beneath him are standing on their own. And the world is watching the truth unfold in real time. Maddie never needed to expose Kody. He exposed himself every time he chose pride over peace. She just stopped covering for him, and that silence, that calm, steady refusal to play the game, became the loudest statement of all. Today, the Browns are no longer defined by one man's authority. They're defined by the women and children who found their voices in his absence. They're defined by laughter that isn't forced, by connection that isn't conditional, by love that doesn't depend on control. That's Maddie's legacy. Not the daughter who rebelled, the woman who healed. Not the one who tore down the family, the one who quietly rebuilt it. And maybe that's the most powerful ending of all. The patriarch's story ends in control, but the family's story continues in peace. And it all started the moment Maddie decided she didn't owe anyone her silence anymore. Kody once called himself the leader, but Maddie, without ever trying, became the example. Because true leadership isn't about being followed. It's about showing people how to stand on their own. And in that sense, she didn't just break his legacy, she redeemed it.